Our topic today is one of supreme importance, the Qur'an and inflation. And of course, we will have to define what is inflation. And to do that properly, we also have to define what is money in Islam, what is money in the Quran. And at the end of the lecture, we're going to have to respond. How should we respond to inflation? And I hope I have an audience today here in London who is prepared to talk and to offer your views. And when you offer your views, the whole world would be listening, because the lecture will go on the internet and people from many parts of the world would be listening. And you might be able to offer a view on the subject from which I also would benefit. But before we begin our topic on the Quran and inflation, let us thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one God, for helping me to arrive in London, to arrive in England on this. It could be the last time that I travel. The war in Ukraine, of course, has reached a stage now where people who support this side or that side are in danger. So now let's turn to the Quran and inflation. And I think you are probably already aware of the definition of inflation. In a free and a fair market, prices rise and prices fall based on demand and supply. When the demand increases and the supply is not enough for the demand, the price goes up. When the supply increases more than the demand, the price goes down. This is a free and a fair market. But when prices are only going up and up and up, not up and down, then that is inflation. And it didn't come to the world for the first time with the modern Western world. We used to have gold and silver coins as money. And then the king or the Raja or the government will then try to stretch the money. How can you stretch the money? Number one, you can stretch the money by diluting the amount of gold in the coin, introducing alloys into it. And as people begin to realize, because the weight is changing, then the money is losing value and the prices will rise. The other way was you chip the coin. So the weight of the coin becomes less. And not every transaction is one in which you'll be able to go and weigh the weight of a coin. By the time you finish the transaction, you've been ripped off. The gold coin has a little less gold it's supposed to have. So these were the ways in which inflation took place in the past, because of the corruption of the money, either through diluting the gold in the money, the silver, or by chipping the coins, making it less in weight. And prices will then rise, keep on rising, because the money was being corrupted. But the present inflation that we now have in the world, around the world, has come not because of the corruption of money as it was done in the past, but because of a different kind of corruption of money. And in order for us to explain that this is a corruption of money that we now have as money, we have to turn to the Qur'an as our primary source of knowledge. And the Qur'an declares of itself, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإنه لحق اليقين, that this book has absolute truth. Once you recognize it as the word of Allah, then whether you understand it or you don't, whether you are comfortable with it or you are not, you have to bow down and submit to it. There are some today who have difficulties because the Qur'an declares plain and clear. Of course, the Pakistan National Assembly doesn't know it. The Qur'an declares plain and clear as daylight, there are only two genders, the male and the female. That's all. And so those who are pursuing an agenda of a third gender would find it a little bit uncomfortable to respond to the Qur'an. But the proper, if you are a Muslim, is once you accept that this Qur'an is the word of the one God, then whether you understand it or you don't, whether you're comfortable with it or you are not, this head must bow in submission. Otherwise, you're in trouble. You're not a Muslim if your head does not bow in submission to the Qur'an, meaning you accept the Qur'an to be absolute truth. And so when we turn to the Qur'an now for a definition of money, and we can't deliver a whole lecture on this subject. I have been lecturing on this subject maybe 25 years now, and I failed. 25 years of effort, and I have failed miserably in convincing my peers, the scholars of Islam, of my view. The surah of the Qur'an, which is the surah par excellence of the end time, is, which you know, Surah Al-Kahf. And it is the surah that you recite for protection for Dajjal. And it is surah which introduces the subject of Gog and Magog. And it is a surah which has money in it. That the young man stood up in a state of defiance of a godless world. They were not scared for their job or their green card or their legal status in Britain or their business and so on. That didn't count for them. They had hearts which were pure. And the heart was in submission to Allah. And the supreme loyalty was to Allah, not to your job, not to your business, not to the government. And so they proclaimed the truth in that godless age. And of course, they had to flee, like our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, had to flee. When you stand up for the truth, you're going to have to flee. When you stand up for the truth, you're going to have to flee. But of course, there are those whose hearts are corrupted. They don't want to leave. So they prefer to betray the truth so they can continue to remain. These young men fled and they stopped at a cave. And remember, they had a dog with them. So a dog has a very important role to play in the end time. And Allah put them to sleep for 300 years. But at the end of 300 years, when they questioned each other, they did not know. Some of them said, we've been here for a day or a part of a day. So they did not know they had stayed in the cave for 300 years. But if you've been sleeping for 300 years, when you wake up, you're going to be hungry. So they sent one of them to go and buy some food and take this money with you. The Qur'an uses the word warik. It's not used anywhere else, warik. And we're not going to deal with the meaning of the word, but the significance is money. Because they're going to use this to buy the food. Therefore, it has to be money. What is important about this reference to money in Surah Al-Kahf is that after 300 years, the money still stored its value. Money has three functions. The first is to function as a medium of exchange for buying and selling. The second is to function as a measure of value. What is the cost of a haircut? What is the cost of 1 kilogram of tomatoes? A measure of value. But money has a third function as well. And it is to this third and most important of all functions that Surah Al-Kahf has directed attention. And that is, money must function as a store of value. That if I work for a whole month and I get my salary, and with this salary I can buy a camel. If I put the salary away, lock it up, and take it out again after 5 years, when I go to the market and I find that I can't buy a camel anymore, I can only buy a donkey, then this money has failed as a store of value. And then 5 years later, when I take it out and I go to the market, I can't buy a donkey anymore. I could only buy a goat. Something is wrong with this money. It's failing as money. And then if I'm in Indonesia or in Pakistan, 5 years later, when I go to the market, I can't buy a goat anymore. I can only buy murgi, chicken. Where has the money gone? I could buy a camel, and now I can only buy a chicken. And I'm getting the same salary. But the money is losing value all the time. So this money has failed as a store of value. And Surah Al-Kahf of the Qur'an, for those who care about studying the Qur'an, for those who care, Surah Al-Kahf of the Qur'an has directed attention to the role of money as a store of value, because after 300 years, that money could still buy the food. When I was a child, I was 5 years of age. My father was a school principal. And he then decided to buy a motor car to take me to school. But in addition to that, he started taking me to the market on Saturdays. And I will be there with my little basket, 5 years of age, running along with my father. This is 1947. I saw my father buy 100 oranges for $1. In those days, we were very sensible people. We didn't have plastic bags. Very sensible people at that time. The bags were made of jute. So 100 oranges for $1. Now that I'm past 80, I go to the same market and with $1, I cannot buy even one orange. So if we fail to recognize that the money that we are using is not storing value, it does not qualify as money, we have only ourselves to blame for being a people who either cannot think or don't have the courage to think, because they know the consequences if they think. So here is the introduction from the Qur'an, that money, in order to qualify as money, must function as a store of value. So if I had the money to buy a sheep in the time of the Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, and provided that demand and supply were to remain the same as at that time, I should be able to buy the same sheep today with the same money in a free and a fair market. Meaning, a free and a fair market would be a market which is using valid money. And then we turn to Surah Al-Baqarah of the Qur'an. And Banu Israel are asking their prophet to pray to Allah to appoint a king. The prophet's name is not mentioned in the Qur'an, but it's from their scriptures, Samuel. And when Samuel appointed Saul, as the king, they had objections. We are more qualified to rule than him. He does not even have this much of weight of wealth. Today we speak of a kilogram, but in the Quran it's called a sa'. He does not have even a sa' of wealth, meaning of money. This is Surah Al-Baqarah. And so now the Quran is telling us that money, in addition to storing value, money must also have weight. Then you can weigh the money. And therefore, in a free and a fair market, you will always have offices in the market where money can be weighed. The gold coin has a certain density, and therefore it has a certain specific weight. And you have the means in the market. The Ottoman Empire had this. amongst the good things that the Ottoman Empire did, it was the last free and fair market that mankind had before modern Western civilization corrupted the market, was the market in the Ottoman Empire, in which there were checks to ensure that the weight of money was correct and the purity of money was correct. And we then have a second reference to money in Surah Al-Kahf. I wish I had the time to question you, but we don't have the time. That this believer was dying and he's leaving behind orphan children. And it was such a terrible state, he couldn't find anyone with whom he could leave the inheritance for his children. Someone who was trustworthy. So what did he do? He dug a hole and he buried the money. And then he built a wall. You know the story. You're not shaking your heads. Not everybody's shaking their heads. You're not studying Surah Al-Kahf. I have a book in the back there entitled Surah Al-Kahf in the Modern Age. So he buried the money and prayed to Allah to preserve this money until his children would grow up. If your child is now 3, 4 years of age and you have to wait 15, 20 years, you have to bury money which can survive underneath there for 15, 20 years, would not rotten, would not decay. The only kind of money which can survive under the earth for 15, 20 years would be metallic money. If I'm wrong, correct me. Metallic money. So gold and silver coins. And this is in Surah Al-Kahf. Then the Qur'an itself makes mention of a gold coin named a dinar. It's there in the Qur'an. It's in Surah to Ali Imran. I'm not going to quote the verse for you. You can check it out yourself. But the word dinar is located in the Qur'an. And it's a gold coin. And the Qur'an also has the word dirham as a silver coin. It's there in the Qur'an. We now come to a very famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, with which I can conclude my definition of money in Islam. And in this hadith, he's defining riba, one form of riba. And he expands the definition of money from the Qur'an to meet the demands of a market where there may be a shortage of gold and silver coins. What do you do? And here's the hadith. He said, gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, salt for salt. He mentioned 6 things. Now then, let me explain this. He says 6 things. Like for like, it must be equal for equal and hand to hand. Otherwise, it would be riba. This is the hadith. But you'll need to get, an explanation. What our Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, is speaking about is a transaction which involves an exchange of gold for gold. or silver for silver, or wheat for wheat, or barley for barley, or dates for dates, or salt for salt. Let me give you an example. You probably already know this example, some of you. Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu came to the Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, one day and offered him some dates. The Prophet looked at the dates, he says, Bilal, these are very high quality dates. Where did you get them? Bilal said, O Messenger of Allah, I had, let's use modern weight measures, I had 2 kilograms of inferior quality dates. And I exchanged them for this 1 kilogram of superior quality dates. So here's a transaction of dates for dates. The Prophet said, Bilal, this is the essence of riba. And you know riba. It is such a terrible thing that the very last revelation to come down in the Qur'an, revelations are coming since the time of Adam alayhi salam, for thousands of years, and now this is the Qur'an, this is the last book. And this Qur'an is coming down for 23 years, and now this is the last word to come down. And in the very last words come down in the Qur'an, Allah declares war on the moneylender. War on this form of riba, the moneylender, lending money on interest. And our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, he cursed. He cursed all 4. And he said they're all equally guilty. The one who takes riba, the moneylender. The one who gives the riba. You borrow the money on interest for whatever it is, and you're now paying the interest. The Prophet cursed you. The one who records the transaction. You're working with a bank. And the 2 witnesses of the transaction. He said they're all equally guilty. And I can go on with this subject of how terrible is the sin of riba. Bilal, this is the essence of riba. What? An exchange of dates for dates, which was unequal. This side was 2 kilograms and this side was 1. Bilal, what you should have done was to sell your 2 kilograms of inferior quality dates and take that money and buy the 1 kilogram of superior quality dates. That would be halal. But if you have an exchange of dates for dates and it is unequal, that's riba. So here's the hadith. Gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, salt for salt. 2 of them are precious metals and the rest, the 4 are commodities of food consumption that you can't do without. And he said, if it is like for like, it has to be equal for equal and hand to hand, meaning it cannot be a credit transaction. Hand to hand means cash, not credit. What has happened in this hadith is that the definition of money is expanded now. That money is no longer gold and silver coins. But if there is a shortage of money in the market, then you are allowed to use commodities of food consumption. If the government has come and banned the use of gold and silver, as the United States did in 1933, they banned it, then you can avoid that gold and silver by turning to these. They can't ban wheat, they can't ban rice, they look stupid. Okay? They can't ban salt. They look stupid. So commodities of food consumption, which cannot be made illegal, can't ban it. And he mentioned wheat and barley and dates and salt. And in Medina, because there was an abundance of dates in the market. So when there was a shortage of gold and silver coins in the market, they would use dates as money. So now what is common to all six is that they were all used as money. This simple explanation, you cannot get any Darul Uloom to give you this simple explanation. That what is common to all six is that they're all used as money. Secondly, that they qualified as money provided that there was an abundant supply in the market. And finally, they could be used as money provided they had a shelf life. You can't use mangoes as money. Why? Mangoes don't have a shelf life. They get rotten. You can't use animals as money. The animal can fall ill, can die. And so now we have a definition of money from the Qur'an and the Sunnah, that money in Islam always has intrinsic value. The value of the money is created by Allah. Is there anyone who differs with me? This is critically important for us to move forward. The definition of money from the Qur'an and Sunnah is that money in Islam always has intrinsic value, meaning the value of the money is in the money. External forces cannot change the value of the money from outside. To change the value of the money, they have to come with guns and physically take away the money from us. Otherwise, we have our money and our money retains its value. It has intrinsic value. So now we turn from the definition of money in the Qur'an to the corruption of money in the modern age. It's not only money which was corrupted. The political system was corrupted. Politicians don't worship Allah anymore. No. Politicians worship a God called electoral success in elections. The supreme loyalty of a politician is no longer to Allah, it's to his party. That's it. And if a politician once famously said, politics has its own morality. Yes, because the morals of a politician constantly change to suit the political climate. So they've corrupted politics, they've corrupted the market today, they've corrupted the economy today. We don't have the time today to deal with the banking system. They've corrupted the educational system. Who wants a Pakistani degree? Huh? A degree from a Pakistan university has no value. You have to get a British degree or an American degree. Well, Imran Hosein proudly proclaims, I got my degree from Karachi University. And when I joined the Institute of International Relations, the government of Trinidad and Tobago said, we'd like to have you in the foreign ministry. but we want you to go back and do international relations. And the Swiss government had taken the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Switzerland, in Geneva, to establish a branch in Trinidad. And they ran it until we took it over. And to get into this institute, you have to be a university graduate. And they sent me to attend this institute, and all my students in the class are all diplomats from this ministry, this foreign ministry, that foreign ministry, and they were graduates from British universities and American universities and Canadian universities and French universities and the University of the West Indies, and just poor Imran, a Pakistan degree. I mention this again and again, just to shake up those foolish people who believe a Pakistani degree is worth nothing. Shake them up. But when the class started, from the first day of the class, it immediately became clear I had something they didn't have. I had something they didn't have. What was it that I had? I had the Qur'an. I had a teacher who taught me how to study the Qur'an. And I had great teachers in Pakistan. And at the end of the year, I came first in their class. In the exam of international economics, I defeated the fellow who had a master's degree from the London School of Economics. Corruption of education today. Corruption of the political system today. Corruption of the market today. Corruption of the world outside there. Yesterday, we used to jump in the river to bathe. We used to drink the water from the river. Who drinks river water today? You see a sign, dangerous for diving, dangerous for swimming, dangerous for fishing. Every river is now corrupted. So it's no surprise that money should also be corrupted. And what is the explanation for this universal corruption? The Qur'an says that it's been sent to explain all things. It says so in Surah Al-Nahl, that this Qur'an has come as tibyanan likulli shay, that this Qur'an has come to explain all things. So if there is universal corruption in the world today, everywhere you turn, it's corrupted. The male-female relationship is corrupted. The bedroom life is corrupted. Where is the explanation of this universal corruption? Surah Al-Kahf of the Qur'an directs attention. This is the surah par excellence of Akhir Zaman, of the end time. Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. But Gog and Magog are the ones responsible for universal corruption on earth. But my peers, with inexplicable obstinacy, the scholars of Islam refuse to study the subject of Gog and Magog from the Qur'an. They refuse to do it. No. The hadith says that Gog and Magog will be released only after Jesus returns. So we're not talking about that now. He hasn't come back as yet. No, the hadith doesn't say that. And you're supposed to go to the Qur'an first for knowledge. The Qur'an comes first. And when you study the subject of Gog and Magog in the Qur'an, only then you go to the hadith. I have failed and failed miserably. I can't get any prominent scholar of Islam anywhere on the face of the earth today to stand up and say, no, the explanation for the universal corruption in the world today is that Gog and Magog have been released. And they are responsible. They are responsible. I'm not going to lecture on Gog and Magog today. But Gog and Magog, from the Qur'an, we can identify them. Excuse me. We can identify them from the Qur'an. They are the ones who control power in modern Western civilization today. I have a book at the back entitled Islamic View of Gog and Magog in the Modern World. And so when we look for the corruption of money in the world today, the explanation for that money, corrupted money, lies directly here in the modern West. And it started with Britain. It started with the creation of the Bank of England, 1690 something, I believe. If you are a resident in Britain, don't waste your time. Study the subject. Study this country. If you are a resident here, study this country. There's much knowledge to be learned that will explain the world today if you study this country the way it ought to be studied, not the way they want you to study it. What Britain did was to turn away from the British pound, which was a gold coin. That's right. The British pound was a gold coin. And to gradually replace money with intrinsic value over a period of time, replace it with money with no intrinsic value. Once money has no intrinsic value, it's bogus. It's fraudulent. It's haram. There are those of you here who might be interested to now study international monetary economics. I studied it at 2 universities. But I came out of the classroom different from the monetary economists, the fellows who become governor of the central banks and usually end up working for the IMF. I came out of the classroom different from those fellows because I had the Qur'an with me. I could recognize that if you print paper and you print a number on that paper, and then you assign to that paper a fictitious value, and then you recognize it as legal tender, then that's fraudulent. You should go to jail for that. Because you're creating wealth out of nothing. And then you take that pile of paper, that's all it is, paper, and you buy all the oil that Saudi Arabia is selling. You're getting it free of charge. If you can understand it, how come the fellas in the central banks don't understand it? How come the politicians don't understand it? That they're actually ripping you off. And then when we say, well, if you could make money out of nothing, well, why don't we also do it? So Pakistan says goodbye to the Qur'an. Yes, goodbye to the Qur'an. And we also now will print paper and put a picture. When I arrived in Pakistan as a student in 1964, Pakistan was just 17 years old at that time. And $1 was valued at 1 rupee and 75 paisas. And when I had to take the bus from Paposh Nagar to Sadar, because you can't afford to travel by taxi, you're a student, you couldn't even afford a rickshaw. The price of the ticket by bus, they call it chawanni. Chawanni means 4 anna. Chawanni. And I think it was 16 to make 1 rupee, 4 anna. And if you want to go and come back, it's atanni, 8 anna, half a rupee. Okay? And you wanted to buy a kilo of mangoes. You know Pakistan has the best mangoes in the world. So a student wants to taste the Pakistani mango. And you could buy 1 kilo of very nice mangoes for 1 rupee, 1 rupee 50, 1.5 rupee. And I went back to Pakistan last year, and a kilogram of, now they call it VIP mangoes, 150 rupees. Huh? But when you're traveling now, you need to keep some money with you when you're traveling. You can't keep Pakistani rupees. You can't keep Bangladeshi taka. You have to keep their money. You have to travel with US dollars or euros or British pounds. And of course, the Singapore dollar is still holding its weight. So they have something called hard currency. It's not just that they're ripping you off by printing paper and using it as money and buying whatever on free of charge, but they are perpetuating the rip-off, making it a permanent system by ensuring that their money becomes the money of trade, the money of travel. You can go to Lower Manhattan with a suitcase filled with rupees, Pakistani rupees. You can't buy a cup of coffee because nobody will accept it. I was in a conference in Brunei with many very distinguished scholars of Islam present. And I got only 15 minutes because I was a small man compared to these great scholars. So I said, let me tell them a joke. And when you tell a joke, you expect people to laugh. And if nobody laughs, terrible, eh? I tell a joke and nobody laughs. So I said, I have to explain this to you, why it is they have hard currency and we don't. I said, they have a secret solution and they dip the money in that solution and it becomes hard currency. We don't have this solution. That's why we don't have hard currency. Nobody laughed. Nobody laughed because they believe this was correct what I was saying. This is the pathetic truth of our scholars. You cannot find any mufti anywhere who will declare that this money we're using is bogus and fraudulent and therefore haram. I met with Qazi Hussein Ahmad. I don't know if he's still alive, maybe he's passed away now. He was the head of the Jamaat Islami. And we had a session in probably Rawalpindi, and it lasted for more than an hour. And because I had studied monetary economics in 2 universities and studied the Qur'an, I could explain the subject to him. When I was finished, Qazi Hussein Ahmad stood up from his chair with indignation, and he stamped his foot. He said, "Ye to dhoka hai." Meaning, this is bogus. This money. This is the head of Jamaat Islami. And this is 20-something years ago. I said, well then, Qazi Sahib, it's haram. No, we can't say it's haram. He just said, ye to dhoka hai. This is bogus. But I cannot say it's haram. Only Mufti can do that. Mufti Azam. And this is Jamaat Islami, which is not your ordinary scholars. These are people who are studying the Qur'an. Maulana Abul Ala Maududi made a tafsir of the Qur'an. And these are people who have dedication to the Jamaat. And yet, I can't say it's haram. I have to mention Dr. Israr Ahmad, may Allah have mercy on his soul, who was a different kind of scholar. And he has fearlessness in him. He also recognized the money to be bogus. But he said it openly, I cannot say it is haram. Only Mufti can do that. That's what he said to me. And so we have to now end this subject of the corruption of money by saying, the biggest failure of all is not the politicians. No. The biggest failure of all is not the governors of the central banks and the monetary economists. No. The biggest failure of all is the scholars of Islam. They are the ones who have led us to where we are today. Well then, before we end, what do we do? Have you read John Perkins' book as yet? Confessions of an Economic Hitman? If you've not, please read it. They have not introduced this bogus system of money. Unwitted the banking system, which I don't have the time to explain today. They've not done this simply to become rich. So the wealth of the world is over here. And now this is heaven. Who wants to go back to hell? Who wants to go back to hell? Over there is only poverty and destitution. It's not just to rip us off, and like a vacuum suction pump, suck the wealth of the world and bring it here, and leave the rest of the world miserably poor. They've done more than that. John Perkins has explained in this book that when they lend you money on interest, they calculate how much you can borrow. They calculate what is your capacity to pay back. And they ensure that they lend you more than you have the capacity to repay. Because they want to enslave you. And that's where Pakistan is today. If you default on your payments, every month you're going to pay the interest and the sum of the capital. If you default, your money will immediately collapse. The day Pakistan defaults, say goodbye. The rupee will be 1,000 rupees to $1. And then the masses will rise up and there'll be civil war and all kind of thing. What do we do? Do we remain in slavery? Or do we seek to recover our freedom? Pakistan is now the laughing stock of the world. They have to go begging and begging and begging, and Modi is laughing his head off. Bangladesh in a terrible state, Indonesia in a terrible state, Algeria and Morocco in a terrible state, all over the world of Islam. The Turkish lira is under attack. So what is the way forward? They have calculated very carefully to ensure you cannot get out of slavery. Hugo Chavez was my next door neighbor. I'm from Trinidad and Hugo Chavez from Venezuela. Hugo Chavez recognized that the IMF was the cause of Venezuela's poverty. And he attempted to take Venezuela out of the IMF. And he failed, because they already put all the rope. They had put all the rope in place that you cannot escape. And so Venezuela could not get out of the IMF. The Venezuelan bolivar today is stacked this high for 100 US, this high of money. This is my response, and with this I will end. The way forward. And I gave this response in a lecture in Pakistan 25 years ago. But nobody listening. I said the way forward is to go to the Qur'an, to go to the scriptures before the Qur'an for guidance. And what we get from the Qur'an and the scriptures which came before the Qur'an is that the moral law is the highest law. That Allah created the heavens and the earth with haqq, with truth. Listen to the ayah in Surah Al-Jathiyah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وخلق الله السماوات والأرض بالحق. That Allah created the heavens, and the heavens is not the best translation, but allow me. Allah created the heavens and the earth with al-haq, truth. And He said more than that, وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. In order that each may receive the recompense of that which it has earned, and none shall be wronged in any way. This universe is a moral order because it is created with truth. And truth must prevail. Not the IMF. Truth must prevail. Let me quote one more verse of the Qur'an from Surah Al-Mujadilah. كتب الله لأغلبن أنا ورسلي إن الله قوي عزيز. I am proclaiming this. It is established that I will prevail and my prophets will prevail. The IMF could do what they want. And Allah is powerful Allah is almighty. And so it is to the truth in the Qur'an that we must turn to find a way forward. And we begin by declaring the moral law is the highest law. I find South America producing people who could understand this truth in the Quran better than us. Hugo Chavez, Evo Morales, the new president in Brazil. South America is producing people who can think, while our people eat biryani and go home and sleep. I'm not speaking about the biryani. I like biryani. My view is, since the moral law is the highest law, the monetary system today is oppression, and therefore we unilaterally reject paying any more interest on any loan, on the grounds that this is oppression and the moral law is the highest law. Number two, and I'm not the first to be saying this, Alan Garcia in Peru, I don't know, 20 years ago, Alan Garcia gave the same views. Number two, we will not pay any more interest, but we will pay the capital sum that is borrowed, because Allah has ordered that in the Quran. But Alan Garcia said, we will pay the capital sum based on our capacity to pay. So we have to see what kind of income we're getting from trade. So from the basis of income, we'll be able to pay a percentage of that. So if you want to squeeze us and put sanctions on us, less money coming, less money for you. So number one, a unilateral rejection or repudiation of paying any more interest on loans. Number two, that we'll repay the capital sum, but will be repaid based on our capacity to repay. This is the way forward. No politician will do this. None, including Imran Khan in Pakistan. No politician will do it. It is when the people rise up and the people force their governments, only then this will happen. South America is different. From the time you make this declaration, you're not paying any interest anymore, and you will pay the capital sum based on your capacity to pay. From the time you make this declaration, your money is going to start collapsing. So you have to have something to replace it. And therefore you cannot move forward unless and until you declare dinar and dirham to be legal tender. Once you declare dinar and dirham to be legal tender, it means that every laborer, whether you're in Algeria or Morocco or Bangladesh or Indonesia or Pakistan, every laborer now has the right to demand that his wage be paid in dinar and dirham. And from the time that is taking place, no longer will you suffer with your wages losing value. Yesterday you could buy a camel, today you could buy a donkey, tomorrow you could buy a goat, and tomorrow after that only a chicken. If you are being paid your wage in dinar and dirham, it will store its value. Where will we get the money from, the dinar and dirham? The answer is, once there is a demand in the market for dinar and dirham, that's what business is about. The businessmen will rush to get the dinar and dirham into the market, to be the first, to be able to cash in. So that's not a problem for the government. The problem is to declare dinar and dirham to be legal tender. Is it possible to do that? Can you declare gold and silver to be legal tender? Answer: you can't do it so long as you are a member state of the International Monetary Fund. Because the International Monetary Fund, the Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund prohibit the use of gold as money. Why have they done that? Because the day you bring gold and silver into the market as money, the bogus US dollar will collapse. That's why. So if we are to move forward, the first step in moving forward is that you must make dinar and dirham legal tender. Only then you can proceed to the next step and have adequate amount of dinar and dirham in the market. And then you can declare, we're not paying any more interest anymore. And we repay the capital sum borrowed, but only on the basis of our capacity to repay. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.